But when she's really turned on, her lust up here makes this not noticeable.
Right.
And so at the very beginning of a relationship, when things are super, super hot and sexy, the disgust response isn't really noticed.
Before we start, a small disclaimer. The Sex Doctors podcast is not a substitute for medical or psychological advice.
Welcome to the Sex Doctors, featuring Dr. Marianne Brandon, clinical psychologist and diplomate in sex therapy, and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler, renowned urologist and expert in sexual medicine and testosterone therapy. Together, they bring you expert insights into sex, intimacy, and relationships. Let's dive in.
Hello, Dr. Brandon.
Hello, Dr. Morgentaler.
So nice to be with you today.
Oh, thank you. It's always my pleasure.
Another podcast, another topic around sex, sexuality, human intimacy.
Yep. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Oh, my goodness.
So I can't wait to hear what you have to talk about today.
Well, you know what I would like to talk about is how men and women talk differently in my therapy room.
Isn't that a great topic? Love that.
I think it's really important because I think knowledge is power. And so often couples show up in my therapy room, and by the time they're seeing me, things have gotten very rough for them. Not always, but often.
Okay.
And they're kind of at a loss as to what has happened and certainly how to right the ship. And it would seem to me that the more information people have on how the sexes differ sexually, the much more equipped they're going to be to solve challenges as they arise and not have them sort of blow up in their faces.
You're saying they differ sexually?
Yeah, well, you're being funny, but actually when I became a therapist, I didn't think that was the case. I was raised by a feminist mom and really, you could do anything a man can do, which is absolutely the case, of course. And so I just sort of assumed it applied sexually too. And it just sort of made sense. So when I started as a sex therapist, I envisioned that if I created a safe space for my clients, I was going to hear the same concerns from everybody, the same stuff. And that's, in fact, not what happened. And it really threw me for a loop because all of a sudden I was thinking, well, now what? How do I help if I don't, I'm hearing all these things from women. I'm hearing these different things from men. But if I don't understand it, how can I be helpful? So put me in a little bit of a panic because I needed to feel like I can offer something.
Yeah. What strikes me is that it's obvious to anyone that men and women are different. We're not the same. And somehow it became, and biologically that's so, right? Mm-hmm. It's obvious. Mm-hmm. And not just humans, but basically all animals.
Yeah.
And somehow it became part of the political correctness story that, we may have some biological differences, but those got minimized.
Yeah.
And the idea that behavior and psychology is identical, it got mixed up with equality. Right?
Yes, it did.
So equality is not the same as being identical.
No, not at all.
Right.
And there's nothing we're saying here that implies that one sex is superior. Nothing.
Right. It's not about better, worse. It's just that there are differences.
Right.
Yeah.
There was an author that made a comment that I thought was so valuable. He was looking at sex differences, and he said there are height differences between males and females. And if we were to approach that by saying, okay, there are more height differences within a sex than between them, because that's the argument we often hear about sex, is there's more differences within women than between women and men, for example. But if we did that with height, and we said there's more height difference within a gender than between, that might be true, but
I like it.
Now lost all the information that's relevant.
Right.
Because there may be a taller woman than the shortest man.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that the differences that are noticed regularly are irrelevant.
Yeah. I really much prefer living in reality.
Well, I think that we really have to if we're going to manage the changes that are coming with AI. I don't want to go down that path right now, but this is like really a part of why I am very motivated to do this podcast, because humanity is about to go through a profound shift. And if we don't understand our own humanness,
Right.
it's going to leave the opportunity for AI in our intimate relationships that I think most people don't want. So that's what we're here for.
I love it. Okay.
Okay.
So how do men and women speak differently in your exam room?
Well, okay. So
consultation room.
before I go there, I want to say that another reason why this is confusing to people, or to women in particular, or men too, is that we don't see these differences when people are doing like short-term dating. So when everybody's like on a college campus, for example,
Right.
these differences are very minimal. These differences show up in longer-term relationships. So most women, when they hear this kind of dialogue that we're going to talk about today, if they have never been in a long-term relationship, they probably won't even relate to it. It's the women in long-term relationships that will. And that's where it gets confusing for people, because if a woman has had a very different sexual experience when she was dating, and then it changes dramatically after she's been married a while, she's she's perplexed. Like, how did this happen? This isn't who I am sexually. Right. So that's why this gets very confusing, is because this stuff shows up in long-term relationships.
Yeah. So also what I'm hearing you say is that who we are sexually, our levels of drive and other things related to that, can also change over time and in our situations.
That's
right.
Absolutely true.
And some of that by itself may differ between men and women.
Yes, absolutely.
And between individuals, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So here we're going to play a little game, and I'm going to...
Okay. I like games.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to give you statements that I tend to hear from one of the sexes, and you tell me if this is what men say, or if this is what women say. Okay. And for the majority of these statements, I honestly may have never heard it from one gender, or one sex.
And what do I get if I get these answers?
Wow, we didn't negotiate that.
All right, we'll just do it. We'll just consider it a moral victory if I get them right.
Okay, you ready?
Ready.
I used to like receiving oral sex. Now I don't anymore.
Well, it's not a guy.
That's
I'm
right.
going to guess women.
There you go.
Ding, 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 ding.
I've never heard a man say that.
Right.
It's not unusual for me to hear a woman say that. There are physiological reasons why this can happen for her, and I don't know that we want to take the time in this podcast to discuss it, but there are reasons for this. There are evolutionary, in fact, reasons why we hear these things. So that's one. So are you ready for another?
Another.
Okay.
I'm ready.
When I see my partner undress, it turns me on. But when my partner sees me undress, they don't respond.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's a guy.
That's a guy.
Yeah.
That's a guy.
Yeah.
Now, I have heard
What's that all about?
a woman say, well, once again, I see all of this as evolutionary based. Our primal sexuality, our instinctive sexuality is inherited, if that's the right term, over hundreds of thousands of years from all, like, sort of the species before us. Right. And over time, until very recently, there were very clear ways to behave sexually to create offspring. And those very clear ways got inherited. Yeah. And they're different for men than they are for women.
But you're not saying that there aren't women who enjoy seeing their men.
Not at all saying that. Not at all saying that. In fact, of all of these, that's probably one that I would say I hear more.
But when you hear it,
it's more often.
It's coming from the guys.
Right. Right. Okay. Ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Here's a difficult one.
I've never been more ready.
Okay. My partner spends hours a day watching porn. Now we shouldn't laugh, because when it's not funny.
No, what's funny about it is that it's so obvious.
It's so obvious. It's so obvious.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we know that one.
So, yeah, but, well, you and I know it. Yeah. As a woman complaining or talking about her men.
Right. And while I've worked with women who feel like they overuse porn, I've actually never heard a hetero man say this about their wife. Right. Never heard it.
Right.
I'm sure it happens, but I've never heard it.
Right.
Okay. Ready?
Yeah.
I don't really care if I ever have sex again.
That's a woman.
That's a woman.
Yeah, guys don't say that.
Never heard it. Never heard it.
Well, I should take it back. Guys can sometimes say it when their testosterone is super low.
That's true.
And, one of the treatments for prostate cancer, especially advanced prostate cancer, is to lower testosterone as much as possible.
Uh-huh.
When testosterone is gone,
That's true.
those guys can sometimes say that. But as a general comment, if somebody is relatively healthy and hasn't had that circumstance, no, that's not something that guys say.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. But that's a very good point you're making.
Yeah.
My partner has all kinds of rules for sex, where I can touch, where I...
Yeah.
Who says that?
Yeah, well, the men say it about their partners.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
As a rule, I bet, and I've heard from some of the men sometimes that they're that the men are fussy too,
Uh-huh.
right? Like there's specific things sometimes, but as a general comment, that's got
Right.
Women all over it.
That's right.
Having all these different rules.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And women don't understand why they develop these rules.
Yeah.
And so, once again, I feel like without an awareness and an understanding, it makes it very difficult to work with the ways that people's sexual experiences unfold over time.
Right.
So,
and I just want to be clear that when I'm laughing, I'm not laughing at these things that people experience and feel and say.
it's horrible, right?
What I'm laughing at is how obvious the gender basis for this is, right?
Right.
That's what I'm laughing at.
Right. I want to turn my partner on, but I'm told that nothing I do feels good to them.
That's a guy talking.
Yeah, it's a guy talking. Now, that one, that one I think has a lot to do with the fact that most of the clitoris isn't easily accessible. Like the amount of the clitoris that's easily accessible is so tiny compared to the total size of the clitoris.
Of the penis. Oh, I see what you're saying. Right, that only a portion of the clitoris is accessible. Most of it is hidden.
So it's difficult for women to know what turns them on because it's kind of hard sometimes to access stimulation when much of your stimulating organ is under the skin.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that's where
a lot of the men's penis is, and penis and clitoris are basically analogous structures for male and women. They come from the same embryological origins. But about half of a man's penis is hidden inside also. But for a woman with the clitoris, it's much more.
Okay, last one. I wish my partner would just relax and let go in bed. Instead, they lie there and expect me to get off.
Well, that's a man talk.
Right. So, these are the kinds of challenges that occur for people over time, and they're pretty typical. And one of the reasons I said there's evolutionary basis, so let me just give you a little bit of information about that so you have a basic understanding, although we should do a podcast just about that. The one is women have a higher disgust response than men in all things.
Disgust response.
Disgust response.
What do you mean by that?
That means that she's, just in general in life, she's got like a lower tolerance for things that disgust her or a reaction to it, right? And that includes sex. So where this gets confusing is that the disgust response is minimized or trumped when people are really lusty, when they're really turned on.
Right.
So if her disgust response is always here, and his might be always here, right? But when she's really turned on, her lust up here makes this not noticeable.
Right.
And so at the very beginning of a relationship, when things are super, super hot and sexy, the disgust response isn't really noticed. But as relationship ages and the lust starts to kind of minimize, I wouldn't say, that's not the right word, but, diminish a little bit, then disgust is right there waiting. And that's how things that used to be sexy become not sexy.
Yeah.
A guy doesn't have that shift over time. He doesn't have to deal with that.
Yeah. I've got two responses to that, or reactions to it. One is that sex is a crazy thing that people do. It's totally out of the usual range of activities, right? And it's not driven by our conscious brain. Like somebody may think that they really enjoy, I don't know, going for a walk or playing golf or tennis or something like that. And there is something part of the brain that like does this. Physical activities, do we do activities together, enjoyable. Sex comes from a deep, and the drive for sex comes from a deep part of the brain. We have only limited ability to control what it is that turns us on and whether we're turned on. So it's a completely special kind of activity. There's nothing else that's like it.
Right.
And this disgust thing is an interesting. You and I have talked about this on our own, of course, and you've taught me about it. And I've read some of the stuff you've given me to read. But it's a really interesting way to think. But I don't think most people think of it with sex. But the example that when I talk to men or lecture about men, you can have a guy who's completely germ phobic, right? Mm-hmm. He's like, he doesn't want to touch doorknobs.
I know where you're going with this. Yes.
But if he's in the middle of sexual passion, he's like full of bodily fluids and sweat and all these things that he would never do in a million years under any other circumstance except sex.
Right.
So there's something about the drive, the being in that part of
his lust, his experience of lust.
Absolutely. Lust takes us there.
Yeah.
But it's not just lust. It's something about the sexual experience, I think, too. Mm-hmm. It's like the brain's in a different state, different category. Mm-hmm. So I get it. So when that's not as strong,
right,
then whatever it is that people find unpleasant or unappealing becomes more prompt.
That's right. And another issue that women are contending with more than men is women have more reactions to things as being not good for sex. So like if she ate too much dinner, not good for sex. If the kids are in the house, not good for sex. Like a lot. Women have lots of these. Now, again, I'm going to argue that's for evolutionary reasons. But what happens then is it becomes difficult when there are so many reasons not to have sex. It becomes difficult for women to kind of get on board. And over time, this is the kind of stuff, these comments that we're talking about, sort of become front and center. Yeah. So the reason this is helpful for women to understand and men is that there are things you can do. First of all, if you realize that your disgust response is kind of taken over, the way to counteract that is amp up your own excitement. Mm. So even before you join your partner, masturbate a little bit, watch some porn, do something that triggers your body. It's going to help. It's going to help with these kinds of reactions. And so that's like a trick that can work if she's motivated and wants it to.
Right.
But she wouldn't know that if we didn't have this conversation. What happens is women make meaning out of this stuff. I must not love my partner anymore. What happened to me? I don't like sex anymore. None of this is true, but it seems true when she doesn't understand what's unfolding.
It's the change.
Yeah, the change.
The change
throws her off.
Notable.
Exactly.
I can imagine that there is a young woman listening who says, this is all BS.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
I'm ready to go at the drop of a hat.
Right.
My sex drive is great. There's nothing that disgusts me sexually.
Right.
And I'm willing to do things, even some of my, if she's straight, with some of my male partners or lovers willing to do, right?
Absolutely.
Somebody listening to that, what would you say to them?
I would say, well, first of all, that's awesome. And
congratulations. Good.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
And, hopefully it'll stay that way. But so many other women are struggling with this stuff.
Right.
So, that's why we take to the mic with this and talk to people. Yeah. Because again, knowledge is power. I want couples to have this information so they can figure things out for themselves.
Yeah. What do you think happens? So, we know friends, acquaintances, maybe clients or patients where there wasn't much sex in a relationship or a marriage. Mm-hmm. That relationship ends. Mm-hmm. And then that person, male or, well, let's call it female, because I think that that's really what we're going for here. And we're not judging, but let's say there's a woman who started off sexual with first relationship or first marriage.
Yeah.
That ended.
Yeah.
And then she's dating again. All of a sudden she's sexual. And the guy sometimes will say to me, can you believe this?
Yeah, right. Because he didn't have sex with her for so long and now she's sexual.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly perfect example of the fact that these changes don't, or these differences are not so evident in long-term or not so evident in short-term relationships. So what happened is she was in a long-term relationship. This unfolded. She left, and now she's dating in short-term relationships, and her sexuality is back the way she understood it decades ago or whatever. That's how it
So
goes.
the guys sometimes will feel like, or say, that they feel duped by the woman.
Yeah, I know.
That when they started, they had a great sex life.
Right.
Their wife or girlfriend at the time was like excited to have sex. They did it all the time, and then it disappeared, or
Right.
was greatly reduced. And now they're off and they're dating again and appear to be sexual.
Right. So I hear that not infrequently, that they feel duped.
Is it a manipulation?
Not at all. And that's again why I want to share this information so people understand.
Yeah.
Because it fuels like hatred between people.
Right. So what is it?
It's simply this evolutionary approach to short-term and long-term mating. I mean that's just how this goes.
Her drive in that new situation
Is back.
is back.
Yeah. And she wasn't trying to manipulate. She's delighted to have it back, and she misunderstands it. She thinks, oh, my drive is back. That meant I was with the wrong guy or whatever it was. And maybe that is true. She was with the wrong guy. But this isn't evidence of it. This is evidence of her evolutionary biology doing what it's designed to do. So,
And
great.
that makes sense to me, because if the evolutionary drive for sex is for reproduction, you gotta have sex to reproduce. Right?
Right.
So new partner, new evolutionary opportunity in a sense, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, or reproductive opportunity.
Right.
Even if reproduction isn't in the equation, because human beings are so smart that we're able to separate out reproduction from
But
sex.
reproduction is in the equation of your primal brain. Your primal brain is completely
That's right.
not tuned into our conscious
That's right.
stuff. So,
Yeah, I like to joke, that the guys, so sex is part of reproduction. We don't really think of it usually that way. We think of sex for sex's sake.
Mhm.
And of course, we know that you have to have sex in order to reproduce normally, unless you got infertility when you can do other things. But they're separate.
yeah.
But if you were to consciously tell a guy that you're the reason you want to have sex, or if we were created or evolved in a way so that this is all about having babies,
Right.
I think guys would lose their sex drive, right?
Well, I think women would too. Like that's not what women are in it for,
Right.
Except at specific times.
Yeah.
And
I think
guys too.
we've evolved so that sex and the pursuit of sex when you're in that situation is the end in itself,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Absolutely. Sometimes when I'm lecturing, I use an analogy, and I'm going to use it now, which is what we're talking about, like strategies for sex and why they're different for men and women, can be understood easier with a gardening analogy. Okay. So the issue is this: men have relatively unlimited supply of sperm, right? I mean, they pretty much can make as much as they want. Right. Women are born with a concrete number of eggs. She can't make any more in her lifetime. And so she's limited. So theoretically, a man could have thousands of kids if he had enough sex, right?
Right.
A woman in her most fertile focus is not going to have more than like 12 kids.
Correct.
I mean,
Right.
okay. So let's take this example to gardening. So let's say I have a gardening store, right? And you want to garden.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to build, you're hungry, you need vegetables. So you come to my gardening store and you ask me for vegetable seeds because you're hungry.
Right.
Now, let's say I like you and I say, oh, here's a big bag of vegetable seeds. And if you want more, come on back. I'll just, as much as you want.
Right.
So you go out to your patch of garden at your house and geez, you've got thousands and thousands of seeds. So what are you going to do? You're just going to throw your seeds all over the place. I mean, just like anything that sprouts is food for you.
Right.
So you're not going to be greedy. You're just going to like throw them around and see what happens. Now, your neighbor sees this and is hungry too. So your neighbor comes to me and says, I want to build a garden too. And I say, okay, well, here's 10 seeds. And your neighbor's like, 10 seeds? My neighbor had 5,000 seeds. And I say, I was in a better mood that day. I don't really. So your neighbor goes home with 10 seeds. Now, how's your neighbor going to garden? Your neighbor is not going to take the 10 seeds and throw them in their backyard.
Scatter them to the wind.
No way.
No.
Your neighbor is going to like look at the sunshine and the drainage and the soil quality and everything they can think of before they plant those 10 seeds to be successful at gardening, right? So the way this works is that neighbor successfully survived by planting those 10 seeds very differently than you did, and your neighbor's going to pass on those strategies to their children. So your neighbor's strategy for farming so carefully is now inherited by the kids. They survived. If your neighbor had just thrown the 10 seeds out, she'd have no offspring to pass on her strategy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love that analogy. So the women obviously are the ones who have the limited numbers of seeds.
Yeah.
They've got few resources. They've got to take care of them very carefully.
Correct.
Right?
Right.
And I think what I'm hearing you say is that as a result of that, successful women, successful in reproductive terms, right? Sort of natural selection, Darwinian stuff, has to have evolved strategies,
right,
where they take really good care of those seeds.
Correct.
And the reproductive opportunities.
Correct.
And the men, Yeah. I love that. I think that makes a lot of sense. Great way of thinking of it.
Right. And so this is not at all about women doing anything wrong. They're responding as they are oriented to do from evolution.
Yeah. Super. Well, so, okay, you convinced me.
Oh, good. Okay.
Men and women say different things to you in the consultation.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not a judgment.
No.
It's just how it goes.
Right. And so the better everyone understands how it goes, the better they'll be able to find ways to work with it and work around it and not have it backfire for them.
Yeah. One day on a podcast, I'd like to talk to you about how you help couples where, let's say it's the woman, has experienced some of these things that we've just been talking about here, and how you actually get them to find that drive again.
Happy to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been great. If you like this content, please give us a thumbs up or a positive review.
We would be so appreciative.
And we'd love it if you subscribe to us. So we hope to see you again at a future podcast. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to The Sex Doctors with Dr. Marianne Brandon and Dr. Abraham Morgentaler. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and tune in next time for more expert advice on sexual health and relationships.
I believe in miracles. Where you from? You sexy thing, you. I believe